Chapter 1: The Outbreak. Emily had always been drawn to helping people. That's why she became a nurse. She loved the feeling of making a difference in someone's life, even if it was just a small one. She never imagined that her skills would be put to the test in such a dramatic and horrifying way. It all started with a patient in her hospital, a young man who had been bitten by an unknown creature. At first, everyone assumed it was just a wild animal attack, but the patient's condition rapidly deteriorated. His skin turned pale, his eyes became bloodshot, and he developed a fever that was off the charts. Emily had never seen anything like it. As the days went by, more patients came in with similar symptoms. The hospital staff struggled to contain the outbreak, but it soon became apparent that it was spreading beyond their control. Panic started to set in as people realized that something terrible was happening. Emily's training kicked in. She put on her protective gear and started attending to the sick patients, even as the hospital descended into chaos. The hospital was quickly overwhelmed, and they had to start turning away new patients. Emily could see the fear and desperation in people's eyes as they begged for help. It wasn't long before the situation became critical. The patients began to exhibit strange behavior, attacking other people and showing no signs of pain or fear. The staff quickly realized that they were dealing with something much worse than a normal infection. It was then that Emily saw her first zombie. The creature was once a patient, but now it was a mindless, flesh-eating monster. Its eyes were blank, and its movements were jerky and unpredictable. Emily froze, unsure of what to do. The zombie lunged at her, and she narrowly avoided its grasp. She knew that she had to get out of there. Emily ran for her life, dodging zombies left and right. She could hear the screams of her colleagues and patients behind her, and she knew that they weren't so lucky. The hospital had become a death trap, and she needed to find a way out. As Emily emerged from the hospital, she was greeted by a scene of utter devastation. The city was in chaos, with zombies roaming the streets and buildings on fire. People were running in every direction, trying to escape the carnage. Emily felt a sense of despair wash over her. How could this be happening? She started to run, not knowing where she was going but just needing to get away from the chaos. She could hear the sound of sirens in the distance, but she knew that help wouldn't be coming. The world had changed, and there was no going back. As Emily ran, she saw other survivors struggling to survive. Some had weapons, others had makeshift barricades, but they all had the same look of desperation in their eyes. Emily knew that she needed to find a group to join if she wanted to have any chance of surviving the apocalypse. Finally, Emily stumbled upon a group of survivors holed up in a small convenience store. They welcomed her with open arms, but Emily could see that they were scared and uncertain about the future. They told her about the virus, how it spread so quickly, and how it turned people into monsters. Emily listened intently, feeling a sense of dread wash over her. She knew that the world would never be the same again. But she also knew that she couldn't give up. She was a nurse and a healer, and she had a duty to help people. Even in the face of the apocalypse, she wouldn't give up. She would fight for survival, for hope, and a cure. Chapter 2: The Meeting. Emily's group marched forward, guns at the ready. The empty streets of the small town made their footsteps echo loudly. They were tense, ready for anything. They had heard rumors of other survivors, but they didn't know if they could trust them. Emily had heard that there was safety in numbers, but they didn't want to end up in a fight with anyone. As they turned a corner, they saw a group of people up ahead. They were heavily armed and wore military-style clothing. Emily's heart sank. She knew that this group could be dangerous. She signaled for her group to stop and raised her hand, hoping for a peaceful interaction. "Who are you?" a gruff voice called out. Emily stepped forward, holding her hands up in a gesture of peace. "We're survivors, just like you," she said, hoping to sound convincing. The leader of the other group stepped forward. He was a tall, muscular man with a shaved head and a scar above his left eyebrow. His eyes scanned Emily's group, taking in their weapons and gear. Emily tried not to flinch under his scrutiny. "I'm Max," he said finally. "And you are?" Emily introduced herself, and explained that they were looking for a safe place to stay. Max didn't seem convinced. "I don't trust anyone these days," he said. "Especially not strangers." Emily could feel the tension in the air, and she knew that things could turn ugly quickly. She tried to appeal to Max's sense of humanity. "We're all in this together," she said. "We need to work together to survive. There's strength in numbers." Max looked at her for a moment, and Emily could see his expression soften slightly. He signaled for his group to stand down, and they lowered their weapons. "Fine," he said. "You can stay the night. But don't expect any favors from us." Emily's group breathed a sigh of relief and followed Max's group into a fortified building. The place was impressive. It had a high fence with razor wire on top and armed guards at every entrance. Emily wondered how Max's group had managed to set up such a stronghold. As they settled in for the night, Emily's group tried to make themselves at home. They shared stories of their experiences and tried to get to know Max's group better. Emily could sense that Max was still wary of them, but she hoped that they could find common ground. The next morning, Max called Emily aside for a private conversation. "I don't trust you," he said bluntly. "But I'm willing to give you a chance. If you're really here to help, then prove it." Emily was taken aback by his directness, but she nodded in agreement. "What do you need us to do?" she asked. "There's a small town nearby that we need to check out," Max said. "We've heard rumors that there might be supplies there. But we can't spare anyone from our group to go. If you're willing to do it, we might be able to trust you a little more." Emily considered the proposal. It was risky, but it could be a way to earn Max's trust. "We'll do it," she said firmly. Max nodded, and Emily knew that this was just the beginning of a difficult journey. But she was determined to prove herself and help her group survive. Chapter 3: The Journey. Emily's group set out on a perilous journey across a post-apocalyptic world in search of a rumored cure for the WWZ virus. The group consisted of a handful of survivors, each with their own unique skill set and personality. Emily was the de facto leader, constantly juggling the demands of keeping her group alive while searching for the cure that could save humanity. The first few days of the journey were relatively uneventful. They encountered other survivors, most of whom were wary of outsiders and unwilling to share resources. Emily's group traded supplies and information with these groups, trying to build alliances along the way. They also faced some harsh environmental conditions, including sweltering heat during the day and freezing temperatures at night. The group had to scavenge for food and water, often resorting to eating whatever they could find in abandoned stores and buildings. As they traveled further, the group encountered more zombies. These were not the slow-moving, groaning creatures of popular culture, but fast-moving, highly contagious monsters that could outrun a human and take down a group of survivors in seconds. Emily's group had to be constantly on guard, using their wits and weapons to fend off the undead. They developed a system of watch rotations, with someone always on the lookout for danger. One night, as the group huddled around a small fire, Emily noticed that one of her companions, a young man named Jack, was acting strangely. He was sweating profusely and muttering to himself, and his eyes had a vacant stare. Emily recognized the symptoms of the virus and immediately isolated Jack from the rest of the group. She examined him and confirmed that he was infected. The group was devastated, knowing that they had to make a difficult decision. Emily's group had a strict policy of not keeping infected individuals with them, as they posed a danger to everyone else. They had to leave Jack behind, knowing that he would soon turn into a zombie. Emily watched as Jack begged for mercy, pleading with her to stay with him and end his suffering. She had no choice but to leave him there, knowing that it was the only way to protect the rest of the group. As they continued their journey, Emily's group faced more challenges. They encountered hostile survivor groups, some of whom were willing to kill for resources. They also faced harsh weather conditions, including a raging sandstorm that forced them to take cover for several hours. Emily struggled to keep her group together, knowing that morale was low and that they were all exhausted and afraid. Despite the setbacks, Emily remained determined to find the cure. She drew strength from the thought of helping others and saving humanity from the apocalypse. She encouraged her group to keep going, telling them that they were making a difference, no matter how small. She reminded them that they were all in this together, and that they had to rely on each other if they were to survive. Finally, after weeks of traveling across a dangerous and unforgiving landscape, Emily's group arrived at the location where the cure was rumored to be. They were exhausted, hungry, and scared, but they knew that they had to push on. Emily led the group towards a dilapidated building, where they hoped to find the cure that could save humanity. As they approached the building, Emily heard a sound that made her blood run cold. It was the sound of a zombie growling, followed by the sound of more zombies joining in. She turned to her group and whispered, "Get ready. This is it." Chapter 4: The Battle. The tension was palpable as Emily's group faced off against Max and his followers. The location was an abandoned research facility on the outskirts of a city, rumored to contain the cure for the WWZ virus. Emily had heard that Max's group was also looking for a cure, and she knew that a confrontation was inevitable. Emily's group had fortified the facility and prepared for the battle, but Max's group was not to be underestimated. They were heavily armed and had experience in combat and survival tactics. Emily knew that they were outnumbered, but she was determined to protect her group and secure the cure. The two groups exchanged fire, with bullets ricocheting off the walls and shattering glass. Emily's heart raced as she dodged incoming fire and returned shots, trying to keep her group alive. The zombies, attracted by the noise, started to swarm the area, adding to the chaos and confusion. Emily caught a glimpse of Max, who was shouting orders to his followers and firing his gun. She could see the determination and ruthlessness in his eyes, and she knew that he would stop at nothing to win. Emily signaled to her group to retreat to a more defensive position, hoping to gain an advantage. The battle intensified as both groups fought fiercely, either willing to back down. Emily's group was taking casualties, and she could feel the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She had led them into this fight, and she knew that the outcome would determine the fate of humanity. In a moment of desperation, Emily saw an opportunity and took it. She charged towards Max, her gun blazing, hoping to take him down. Max was ready for her, and the two engaged in fierce hand-to-hand combat, their fists and feet connecting. Emily was skilled in self-defense, but Max was stronger and more experienced. He managed to disarm her, and Emily found herself defenseless. Max raised his gun, ready to end her life, but then he hesitated. Emily saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes, and she seized the opportunity. "Max, we can work together," Emily pleaded, hoping to appeal to his better nature. "We both want the same thing, to find a cure for the virus and save humanity. We don't have to fight each other." Max hesitated, his finger hovering over the trigger. Emily could see the conflict in his mind, the battle between his survival instinct and his conscience. Finally, Max lowered his gun and nodded. "You're right," he said. "We can work together. But only on my terms." Emily knew that Max was still the same ruthless leader, but she also knew that they had to put their differences aside to achieve their goal. She agreed to Max's terms, and the two groups combined their efforts to secure the cure. The battle was over, but the cost was high. Emily's group had lost many of its members, and they were all physically and emotionally exhausted. Emily looked around, surveying the damage, and she knew that the fight was far from over. But she also knew that they had taken a step forward toward finding a cure and saving humanity. As Emily's group prepared to leave the research facility with the cure, Max approached her. "I'm sorry for what I did," Max said, his eyes downcast. "I was wrong, and I see that now. I want to make it up to you and your group. Let me help you rebuild." Emily was surprised by Max's apology, but she could also see the sincerity in his eyes. She knew that they needed all the help they could get, and she agreed to work with Max toward rebuilding society. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Chapter 5: The Aftermath. As Emily's group trudges back to their base with the cure in tow, the reality of their recent battle sinks in. The group is weary, and the weight of their losses hangs heavy on them. Emily walks with a sense of purpose, trying to keep the group together and focused on their mission. As they approach their base, they can see the flicker of fires in the distance, and the smell of smoke drifts towards them. Panic sets in, and Emily breaks into a run, urging her group to follow. When they reach the base, they find it under attack by a horde of zombies. The group quickly jumps into action, fighting off the zombies and trying to secure the perimeter. Emily is stunned by the devastation wrought by the zombies. Buildings have been reduced to rubble, and the once bustling streets are now filled with the undead. As she surveys the scene, she realizes that they are outnumbered and outgunned. But Emily is determined not to let their hard-won victory slip away. She rallies the group, reminding them of the importance of their mission and the stakes at hand. Together, they start to organize their defense, setting traps and barricades to slow down the zombie horde. As night falls, the zombies become more aggressive, sensing the group's vulnerability. Emily orders her group to retreat to the main building, where they can better defend themselves. The group moves quickly, but not before a few members are taken down by the zombies. Once they reach the main building, they fortify it as best they can, using anything they can find to block the entrances and windows. Emily orders everyone to conserve their ammunition, knowing that they will need it to make a final stand. For hours, the group fought off wave after wave of zombies, their weapons ringing out through the night. Emily is in the thick of the action, fighting side by side with her comrades. As the night wears on, Emily starts to worry that they won't make it through alive. But just when all seems lost, Emily sees a glimmer of hope on the horizon. In the distance, she can see headlights approaching, and the sound of an engine grows louder. As the vehicle gets closer, Emily recognizes it as the group's backup, whom they had sent out for reinforcements earlier. The backup group arrives just in time, providing much-needed firepower and support. Together, Emily's group and the reinforcements are able to push back the zombie horde and secure the base. Exhausted and battered, Emily's group gathers around a campfire, nursing their wounds and mourning their losses. But Emily knows that they can't rest for long. The world is still a dangerous place, and the fight for survival is ongoing. As she looks around at her group, Emily feels a sense of pride and gratitude. They have been through so much together, and they have come out on the other side stronger and more united than ever before. Emily knows that there will be more challenges ahead, but she also knows that they are up to the task. With the cure in their possession and the support of their comrades, Emily's group stands ready to face whatever the post-apocalyptic world throws their way. They are survivors, and they will not be defeated. Chapter 6: The Hope. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she saw Max walking towards her. She tensed, expecting a fight, but to her surprise he held out his hand in a gesture of peace. "Emily, I know we've been enemies in the past, but I want to make things right," Max said, his voice sincere. Emily hesitated for a moment, unsure if she could trust him. But then she saw the look in his eyes, and she knew that he was being genuine. "Okay, Max. What do you suggest we do?" Emily asked cautiously. Max smiled, relieved that she was willing to give him a chance. "Well, first, we need to secure the perimeter and make sure that no more zombies or hostile survivors can get in. Then, we need to start rebuilding. We can use the resources we've gathered and work together to create a safe and sustainable community," Max said, his words confident and reassuring. Emily nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. She had always dreamed of a world where people worked together towards a common goal, and she knew that Max's skills and experience could be valuable in achieving that. "Okay, let's do it," Emily said, determined. The two leaders joined forces, and together they rallied their groups to work towards their shared goal. They fortified the base, set up a system for food and water distribution, and started building new structures and facilities. As the days passed, Emily and Max worked closely together, getting to know each other better and building a sense of trust and camaraderie. They shared their past experiences and their hopes for the future, bonding over their shared struggles and triumphs. Emily was surprised to discover that Max had a softer side, that he genuinely cared about the people in his group and wanted to make a positive impact on the world. She saw him in a new light, and she realized that maybe people weren't as different as they seemed. Together, they faced new challenges, including a shortage of medical supplies and a group of raiders who tried to attack their base. But through it all, they remained steadfast in their mission, refusing to let the chaos and violence of the world break them. Months passed, and the community flourished. They had built a new world, one that was based on cooperation, compassion, and mutual respect. Emily and Max had become close friends, and Emily knew that she had found a new family in this community. As she looked out over the bustling base, Emily felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. They had come so far, and yet she knew that there was still much more to be done. The world was still a dangerous and unpredictable place, and the threat of the virus and the zombies still loomed. But Emily knew that as long as they had hope and worked together, they could overcome anything. She smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face, and knew that a new dawn had come. Epilogue. Emily stood atop the highest building in the city, looking out over the vast expanse of destruction and decay that had once been a bustling metropolis. The sun was setting, casting a blood-red hue across the sky as if nature itself was mourning the loss of humanity. Emily's mind wandered back to the days when the outbreak was still fresh and the world was in chaos. She remembered the fear and desperation, the loss of loved ones, and the struggle for survival. But she also remembered the hope and determination that kept her going, the belief that there was a way to beat the odds and find a cure. And now, here she was, standing on top of the world, with a cure in her hands and a chance to rebuild society from the ashes. It had been a long and grueling journey, with many sacrifices along the way, but Emily had never given up. She had fought tooth and nail for what she believed in, and now she had a chance to make a difference. Emily looked down at the bustling streets below, where people were going about their daily lives, working, laughing, and living. It was a far cry from the desolate wasteland that had greeted her when she first arrived, and she felt a sense of pride in what she had accomplished. But she also knew that there were still challenges ahead and that there were still pockets of resistance and danger lurking in the shadows. She turned around and saw Max standing behind her, his face weathered by time and experience. He had been her greatest adversary, her most ruthless enemy, and her closest ally in the end. They had fought tooth and nail, but in the end, they had found a way to work together for the greater good. Max looked out over the city, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and hope. "I never thought I'd see the day when we'd make it this far," he said, his voice low and gruff. "But I'm glad we did. We've got a chance to make things right, to build something new from the ashes." Emily nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude towards Max despite everything he had put her through. "We couldn't have done it without you," she said, smiling. "You were our greatest challenge, but you were also our greatest asset." Max chuckled, a rare moment of levity in a world that had seen too much pain and suffering. "I guess we make a good team, after all," he said, his eyes sparkling with a newfound sense of purpose. Emily looked out over the city once more, feeling a sense of hope and determination wash over her. They had come so far, and there was still so much to do, but she knew that they could do it together. They could build a new world, one free from the horrors of the past, where humanity could thrive once more. As the sun set behind them, Emily and Max stood side by side, looking out over the city, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were the survivors, the fighters, the ones who refused to give up. They were the ones who had found a cure, and now they had a chance to make things right. The future was uncertain, but they were ready to face it, one step at a time.